Dr. Scott Gottlieb, the FDA commissioner, has vowed to end drug companies' practice of preventing generic manufacturers from getting samples as a means of lowering drug prices. CreditEric Thayer for the New York Times, May 17, 2018. Pharmaceutical companies that spend billions of dollars to develop new drugs do not want competitors to profit from inexpensive, generic copies of blockbuster medicines. To avoid rivals, they fight for patent extensions, seek new uses for old products and, sometimes, prevent generic drug companies from obtaining samples. Dr. Scott Gottlieb, the Commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration, calls this "gaming the system," and has vowed to stop it as part of the government's campaign to lower drug prices. On Thursday, the FDA took a new tack and began posting a list of makers of brand-name drugs that have been the target of complaints, to persuade them to end the shenanigans, in the Commissioner's words. Dr. Gottlieb calls it transparency, but this approach is better known among ethicists as naming and shaming. Congressional efforts to force the companies to hand over samples of their drugs to generic competitors have not been successful. Recent proposals to ensure generic access to drug samples would save the federal government $3.8 billion over 10 years, according to the Congressional Budget Office, partly by lowering Medicare and Medicaid spending on prescription drugs. The Federal Trade Commission has also been investigating the practice. Some brand-name drug makers say the legislation is not needed. The FDA has been speeding up approval of generic drugs, and nearly 90% of prescriptions are filled with generic drugs. But others point to the ways in which major pharmaceutical companies have managed to keep patents on certain expensive drugs for years longer than necessary. Generic drug developers usually need between 1,500 to 5,000 units of the brand drug to develop their product, and test it, to show that it is effective and can be absorbed at the same rate as the brand drug, according to the agency. Both the FDA and the Federal Trade Commission say securing the samples can be difficult, because major drug firms can invoke safety concerns, real or unreal, to avoid providing the materials. The FDA's new list includes drug companies the agency said may be pursuing gaming tactics to delay generic competition. Along with the name of each business, the agency noted how many inquiries it received from generic drug companies seeking supplies. Names of the generic companies were not provided. Image: the Swiss biotechnology company Actelion was a top offender on Mr. Gottlieb's list of hoarders. Credit: Fabrice Coffrini, Agence France Presse, Getty Images. While Celgene tops the list, other companies that the FDA named as the subject of complaints included GlaxoSmithKline, Pfizer, Valeant Pharmaceuticals International, BioMarin Pharmaceutical, Gilead Sciences and Novartis Pharmaceuticals. Celgene, which makes drugs to treat cancer and immune-inflammatory diseases, was named as the subject of 31 inquiries from companies seeking access to Revlimid, lenalidomide, its treatment for multiple myeloma and related diseases, Pomalyst, pomalidomide, and Thalidomide, thalidomide. Celgene has been embroiled in lawsuits for several years with companies seeking access to the drugs. It recently sued Drive Reddy's Laboratories Limited, an Indian company, to block it from selling generic copies of Revlimid, the company's biggest product, and has been fending off an attempt by Mylan to also get into the generic Revlimid business. At a court hearing last year, a lawyer for Mylan, Jonathan M. Jacobson, told the federal district judge that the drug costs dying patients $20,000 a month, a price that would decline if generics were available. Greg Geisman, a spokesman for Celgene, said the company had not prevented generic companies from obtaining their products. "We have sold and will sell our groundbreaking products to generic manufacturers for the purposes of bioequivalence testing, subject to reasonable safety-related and business requirements. Mr. Geisman said. Generic versions of Thalidomide and Revlimid are expected to enter the market in coming years. Geisman also said that Celgene supports federal efforts to promote access to samples at reasonable prices, as long as there is appropriate safety and liability protection for the seller. The next biggest target, with 26 inquiries, is Actelion Pharmaceuticals Limited, a Johnson. There were 14 inquiries about getting supplies of Tracleer, bosentan, a medication prescribed for high blood pressure in the vessels of the lungs, known as pulmonary arterial hypertension. The FDA also received 8 complaints about lack of access to Opsumit Motritentan, which is also used to treat pulmonary arterial hypertension. There were also several complaints about a lack of access to Actelion Savesca, Miglustat, and Velitri, epoprostenol sodium. Velitri is also used to treat pulmonary arterial hypertension and Zavesca is indicated for Gaucher disease. An average 1-month supply of Tracleer costs just over $12,000, and a supply of Opsumit runs $8,900 to $10,000, according to GoodRx, which tracks drug prices. Both prices are based on the patient presenting a free discount coupon. Many pharmaceutical companies sell both brand name and generic drugs, leading to a situation in which a company like Mylan, still fighting Celgene in court, can be on the receiving end of generic company complaints. The FDA's list of shame notes 3 inquiries from companies trying to get access to Mylan's amnestine isotretinoin, used to treat severe cystic acne that has not responded to antibiotic treatment.